Good afternoon, everyone. So, now that we've finished the section on water, we're going to go over into moving irrigation systems. So, these are systems like center pivots that move while they are delivering water to the field. And the reason why we have these kind of moving systems is your management strategies are simpler, and that just refers to the fact that um, it's less labor intensive, and you don't have to move the system yourself. And then scheduling can be done more accurately, so you can precisely at a precise rate deliver this water over a specific area. It's mainly used for agronomic and gardening uses. So agronomic is something like maize, potatoes, etc. And then you can apply a smaller amount more frequently. So because it is moving, you can apply a smaller amount while it is moving. And because it's moving, you can do that more frequently. So we'll specifically be looking at center pivots. And to explain maybe to those who don't know what a center pivot is, a center pivot, so there's a picture of it. So you've got these bars with a structure, a support structure, or a pivot structure like this, and then another span. So that bar is called a span with another structure, and it goes on. So what happens is if you have a top view of your field, then you'll always see circular fields like this. And so this whole center pivot has a middle point, which is about there somewhere, and that is this point. And so these spans are set out like this, so from the middle to the outside of your field. And these structures with the wheels on, they are lined in between like this. And so this wheels and the structure is necessary because this thing is constantly moving around and delivering water to that specific area. So we have different kinds. We've got the fixed pivot. So this is something like what I've sketched here. This middle part is stuck in the ground, or it's at a specific point, and then the pivot just moves around. Then we've got a towable pivot. So it's a lot similar to this, except that this middle part and this whole structure then can be towed to a different field. So if you've got a field next to this one, like this, then you can move this whole structure. You can tow it with your tractor and place it there. And then lastly, linear moving pivots. So this is for a circular field. It does happen sometimes that you've got a rectangular field, so something like this, and you want to provide this field with water. So you'll have this structure, as you can see, with the wheels, and it comes over like this. And there's the structures with the different kinds of wheels, and it moves in this direction. So because it moves linearly, you can provide water to this whole field. Towability, so that's when we're back to towable center pivots. What's important when you have towable center pivots, or you want to tow your center pivot, is the soil type, so and topography. So to make sure, if you're working on a clay that has a lot of slopes and rocks, to be careful of towing your center pivot over an area like that, and then your center pivot length. So it's always important to make sure to call the manufacturer of your center pivot to make sure what the maximum number of spans is that you can tow at once. Roads, so if you're towing your center pivot, your towable center pivot on a road, to make sure that it is at least 6 meters wide and that it's a very even road. Span combination and electricity supply. So just with your span combination, always make sure to contact your manufacturer to make sure that you have the right combination, and then remember to plug out your center pivot before towing the pivot. So the construction of a center pivot, you've got your pivot structure, which refers to this part. So this is basically the main part of your structure. It is the anchor of your whole center pivot. Then next is the span. So the span refers to this whole area over there. And make sure that you have the right combination of pipes in your span. So the span refers to both the pipe that delivers the water and the frame that supports that pipe. So that's the span. Length and pipe diameter. That just to make sure that you have the right ones. Crop clearance. So the top clearance refers to this area. So you've got this span and your structure, and so sometimes it occurs that while this thing is rotating, like in this sketch, your soil isn't even, so you'll maybe have a soil that looks like this. So make sure with your design of your center pivot that you are adjusting for slopes like this in your soil. So top clearance just refers to that distance. And next is the pivot flex or towability. So make sure that your center pivot can be towed. Pivot flex, that refers to when you have a center pivot, and maybe this will be a good example of this sketch. So you've got your pivot structure, which you have your anchor, which is this one, and then all of a sudden you have a slope like this. So the pivot flex refers to the amount of slope that this point right here can handle. So pivot flex is just a pivot that is capable of handling a slope and a gradient like this to be ordered in order to be used at an angle. Then overhang. Overhang refers to if this is your center pivot, so this is the base, the anchor structure, next structure, and then you have another structure, and then that last bit, as you can see in this sketch, that last bit is called the overhang. And then slope, that's important in your structure. So safety of center pivots. There are two types of mechanisms used in the safety of center pivots. One where the pump switch is off and the center pivot stops, and then center pivot stops and the pump switches off. So why you need these kinds of safety mechanisms is if you have your center pivot, so if we're looking at mechanism number one, you have a center pivot like this one that's moving in a circular direction, and all of a sudden the center pivot stops. So this thing stops moving in a circular direction. What happens is the pump still continues to deliver water, and what that causes is that too much water will be delivered in one location. So if this thing moves and it stops in this location, then it still delivers water to that location, but it's going to continually deliver water in one area, and that's not what you want. And then secondly, your center pivot is moving and it stops, and so but the pump still continues to deliver water. So then because the center pivot stopped, the pump will switch off. And that is it for this video.